6 Signs of a Stupid Person. Hey there, let me ask you something. Have you ever met someone who, no matter what, seems completely resistant to logic, reason, or even the most basic sense of common courtesy? Someone who leaves you wondering, what were they thinking? Or were they even thinking at all? Yeah, you know the type. Here's the truth. Stupidity isn't about how smart you are, how much you know, or whether you've got a bunch of degrees on your wall. Nope. Stupidity is all about behavior. It's about the choices we make, the way we treat people, and whether we're willing to grow and adapt, or dig in our heels and refuse to change no matter how much the world around us is screaming for it. Now, let's be clear. We're not here to roast anyone or play the blame game. This isn't about pointing fingers and saying, "You're stupid." No, this is about recognizing the signs of stupidity. Because let's be honest, we all have our moments. And if you're serious about becoming a better version of yourself, you need to know what these signs look like, both in others and in your own life. So stick with me. In this video, we're diving deep into 6 unmistakable signs of a stupid person. Some of these might surprise you, some might make you laugh, and some might hit a little too close to home. But hey, that's good. It means you're paying attention. Ready? Let's go. Alright, before we jump into the 6 signs, let's get one thing straight. What exactly is stupidity? Because let's face it, we throw that word around all the time. That's a stupid decision. He's acting stupid. This whole situation is stupid. But what does it really mean? Let me tell you, it's not about IQ. It's not about how many books you've read or how high you scored on your last test. Stupidity is a mindset. It's a pattern of behavior that shows up when someone refuses to learn, adapt, or think critically. It's not about what you don't know. It's about what you won't know because you've decided you don't need to. Think about this. How often have you seen someone double down on a bad idea, even when everyone else is screaming, "Stop, this is a disaster"? Or someone who won't take 2 seconds to question their own opinion because they're so sure they're right. That's stupidity. It's this stubborn, almost defiant resistance to growth, reason, and understanding. And here's the kicker. It's not always obvious. Some of the smartest people you know might fall into the trap of stupid behavior. Why? Because intelligence and wisdom aren't the same thing. You can be brilliant in one area of life and completely blind in another if you're unwilling to challenge your own beliefs or step out of your comfort zone. So, as we go through these 6 signs, I want you to keep one thing in mind. Stupidity isn't about other people. It's about patterns of behavior that anyone, yes, even you and me, can fall into. But the good news? Recognizing these signs is the first step toward breaking free from them. Ready to dive in? Let's go. Sign 1, refusal to learn. Let me tell you something. One of the clearest signs of a stupid person is their flat-out refusal to learn. Now, I'm not talking about someone struggling to understand a new concept or needing extra time to figure something out. No, I'm talking about that stubborn, unshakable attitude of, "I already know everything I need to know, and nothing you say is going to change that." Sound familiar? It's that person who rejects new ideas, even when they're staring them right in the face. It's the kind of mindset that says, "I'm comfortable with what I know, and I don't care if the world around me is moving forward. I'm staying put." Let's break it down. When someone refuses to learn, they shut the door on growth. Think about it. The world is constantly changing. New information, new technology, new ways of thinking are popping up every single day. And if you're not willing to adapt, guess what? You get left behind. It's that simple. Here's an example. Imagine someone who refuses to learn how to use a smartphone. "I don't need it," they say. "The old way works just fine." Meanwhile, everyone else is booking flights, managing their finances, and staying connected with loved ones, all with a device in their pocket. Refusing to learn doesn't make you smart or principled. It makes you stuck. And worse, it can make you irrelevant. But it doesn't stop at technology. It shows up in conversations too. Have you ever tried to explain something to someone who's already made up their mind? No matter how much logic, evidence, or reason you bring to the table, they're not budging. Why? Because admitting they might be wrong feels like admitting defeat, and their ego just won't allow it. Here's the real tragedy. Refusing to learn doesn't just hold you back. It affects the people around you. When you resist change, you limit your ability to contribute, collaborate, and connect. And in the long run, you're not just hurting yourself, you're dragging others down with you. So ask yourself, are you open to learning? And I don't just mean picking up a new skill or reading a book. I mean truly listening to other perspectives, questioning your own beliefs, and admitting when you don't know something. Because the smartest thing anyone can say is, I don't know, but I'm willing to find out. Think about it. Is there something in your life that you've been avoiding learning? Maybe it's time to change that. Let's move on to the next sign, but keep this one in mind. It's foundational to everything else we're about to discuss. Ready? Let's go. Sign 2, overconfidence in one's opinions. Let's talk about confidence. Now don't get me wrong, confidence is a great thing. In fact, it's essential. But here's the catch. When confidence crosses the line into overconfidence, it becomes a red flag for stupidity. Why? Because overconfidence blinds people. It makes them believe they're always right, even when they're painfully, obviously wrong. We've all seen it before, haven't we? The person who speaks with so much certainty that you almost start doubting yourself, even though you know for a fact they're wrong. They're the loudest voice in the room, throwing opinions around as if they're absolute truth. And here's the kicker. The less they actually know, the more confident they seem to be. This phenomenon has a name. It's called the Dunning-Kruger effect. Basically, it means that people with low ability in a certain area often overestimate their competence. In other words, the less they know, the more they think they know. And the more they think they know, the less they're willing to listen, learn, or even consider the possibility that they might be wrong. Here's an example that might hit close to home. Have you ever been in an argument with someone who's clearly out of their depth but refuses to back down? You're calmly explaining your point, citing facts, maybe even providing evidence, and they're sitting there, arms crossed, shaking their head, saying, "Nope." That's not how it works. At some point, you realize you're wasting your breath because they're not interested in the truth. They're only interested in winning. Overconfidence isn't just frustrating, it's dangerous. It leads people to make terrible decisions because they're so sure they're right that they don't stop to think, question, or research. They don't consult others, they don't check their facts, and they certainly don't admit their mistakes. And when things inevitably go wrong, guess what? They'll blame everyone else. But here's the thing about overconfidence. It's a mask. Deep down, it often hides insecurity or fear, because admitting you don't know something takes courage. It takes humility. And for someone caught in the trap of overconfidence, humility feels like weakness. So, how do you spot this in yourself or others? Pay attention to how often someone uses phrases like, "I know this for a fact," or "I'm 100% sure." Do they listen when others speak, or do they dismiss different perspectives without a second thought? And here's the big one. Do they ever say, "I might be wrong"? Because let me tell you, the smartest people in the world have no problem saying those 4 little words. So here's the takeaway. Confidence is great, but it has to be balanced with curiosity and humility. If you're not willing to question your own opinions or admit when you're wrong, you're not confident, you're just stuck. And that's not a good place to be. Think about the last time you were sure about something. Were you really right, or were you just being loud? Let's keep going. We're just getting started. The next sign is one you definitely don't want to miss. Let's move on. Sign 3, blaming others for their mistakes. Alright, let's get real. This one's a classic. If there's one behavior that screams stupidity louder than anything else, it's the inability to take responsibility for your actions. Instead of owning up to their mistakes, stupid people point fingers, make excuses, and look for anyone else to blame. Why? Because in their mind, admitting fault equals admitting weakness, and their ego just can't handle it. Let's paint a picture. You're at work, and something goes wrong. A missed deadline, a botched project, or a miscommunication. The smart thing to do: take a step back, figure out what went wrong, and say, okay, here's what I could have done better. But the stupid thing? Immediately deflect blame. It's not my fault. The instructions weren't clear, the tools weren't right, my teammate dropped the ball. Sound familiar? Here's the problem. When you blame others, you stop growing. You're so busy dodging accountability that you miss the opportunity to learn from your mistakes. And mistakes are gold. They're how we grow, improve, and avoid screwing up the same way twice. But if you refuse to take ownership, guess what? You're doomed to repeat the same mistakes over and over again. But let's dig a little deeper. Why do people do this? Why is blaming others such a go-to move for stupid behavior? The answer lies in fear. Fear of looking bad, fear of feeling inadequate, or fear of facing the consequences. It's easier to shift the blame than to stand in the spotlight and say, yeah, that one's on me. But here's the kicker. People respect accountability. They respect honesty. You lose far more credibility by making excuses than by admitting you messed up. This behavior doesn't just stop at work either. It shows up in relationships, families, and friendships. Ever had a friend who never takes responsibility for their actions? It's exhausting, isn't it? They'll twist every situation to make themselves the victim, leaving you to clean up the emotional mess. That's not just bad behavior, it's toxic. And let's not forget the big picture here. A society full of people who refuse to take responsibility is a society stuck in a cycle of blame. Think about it. Problems don't get solved, conflicts don't get resolved, and everyone's too busy pointing fingers to move forward. It's chaos. So what's the lesson here? It's simple. Own your mistakes. And I mean really own them. If something's your fault, say so. No excuses, no deflection, no trying to soften the blow. Just, I screwed up, and here's what I'm going to do to fix it. That's where real growth happens. Ask yourself, when was the last time you made a mistake? Did you take responsibility, or did you look for someone else to blame? Be honest, and if you've been guilty of this behavior, don't beat yourself up. Just commit to doing better. Accountability isn't just a sign of intelligence, it's a sign of strength. Ready for the next sign? Trust me, it's a big one. Let's keep going. Sign 4, lack of empathy. Alright, here's a big one. One of the clearest signs of stupidity is a total lack of empathy. The inability or unwillingness to see things from someone else's perspective. And let me tell you, this isn't just a sign of being inconsiderate. It's a hallmark of a mind that's closed off, disconnected, and emotionally stunted. Think about this. Empathy is the bridge that connects us as human beings. It's what helps us understand each other, navigate relationships, and solve problems together. When you take empathy out of the equation, everything breaks down. People become selfish, cold, and oblivious to the impact of their actions on others. Now, let me give you a real-life example. Have you ever been around someone who just bulldozes through a conversation, completely ignoring your feelings or perspective? Maybe you're sharing something personal or trying to explain how a situation affected you, and they respond with something like, "Well, I don't think it's that big of a deal." Or worse, "You're overreacting." That right there is a lack of empathy, and it's not only frustrating, it's downright disrespectful. Here's the thing. People who lack empathy often live in their own little bubble. They're so wrapped up in their own experiences, opinions, and needs that they can't, or won't, take a moment to understand someone else's reality. It's not just that they don't care, it's that they don't even try to care. And when you think about it, that's pretty stupid, isn't it? Because empathy doesn't cost anything. It doesn't require a degree, a high IQ, or special training. All it takes is a willingness to listen and imagine yourself in someone else's shoes. But the consequences of a lack of empathy are massive. It ruins relationships, destroys teamwork, and creates conflict where none needs to exist. A lack of empathy says, "I don't care how my actions affect you." And that kind of attitude spreads like wildfire. It shows up in toxic workplaces, fractured families, and even entire communities. Here's the kicker. Empathy isn't just about being kind, it's also about being smart. When you understand where someone else is coming from, you make better decisions. You communicate more effectively, you avoid unnecessary arguments, and you build stronger connections. In short, empathy isn't just emotional intelligence, it's practical intelligence. So, how do you spot this sign in yourself or others? Watch for dismissive behavior, self-centered conversations, or a tendency to minimize other people's experiences. And here's the hard part. Be honest with yourself. Have there been times when you could have been more empathetic, but chose not to be? Maybe you were too busy, too distracted, or just didn't want to deal with it. It happens, but recognizing it is the first step to changing it. Here's the challenge. Next time you're in a conversation, make a conscious effort to really listen. Don't just wait for your turn to talk. Pay attention to what the other person is saying, how they're feeling, and what they need. And if you catch yourself dismissing someone's perspective, stop. Take a breath and ask yourself, how would I feel if I were in their shoes? Empathy is one of the most powerful tools you can have in life. It opens doors, builds trust, and creates understanding. Without it, you're just stumbling through the world blind to everyone around you, and that's no way to live. All right, let's keep this momentum going. The next sign is one that a lot of people struggle with, and it might hit closer to home than you'd like. Let's dive in. Sign 5, repeating the same mistakes. Let me ask you something. How many times have you seen someone make the same mistake over and over again? Maybe it's a friend who keeps dating the same toxic type of person, a colleague who always procrastinates until they're scrambling to meet deadlines, or even yourself, stuck in a cycle of bad habits you just can't seem to break. Sound familiar? Here's the harsh truth. Repeating the same mistakes is one of the clearest signs of stupidity. Why? Because it shows a complete unwillingness, or inability, to learn from experience. Albert Einstein is often quoted as saying, "Insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results." But honestly, it's not just insanity, it's stupidity too. Think about it. Life has a way of teaching us lessons. When you touch a hot stove, you get burned. That's a clear, immediate consequence, and most of us learn from it pretty quickly. But some mistakes aren't as obvious. Maybe the consequences aren't immediate, or maybe they're easy to brush off. And that's where the trouble starts. Instead of stepping back, reflecting, and asking, what went wrong, and how can I avoid this next time? Stupid behavior kicks in and says, it's fine, I'll just do it the same way again. Let's break it down. Repeating mistakes happens when people refuse to take responsibility, lack self-awareness, or are too lazy to make changes. For example, someone who always overspends and then wonders why they're broke at the end of the month. Instead of budgeting or cutting back, they keep swiping their credit card and hoping things magically improve. Spoiler alert, they won't. Here's another classic example, relationships. Have you ever known someone who keeps falling for the same type of person, even when it always ends in heartbreak? They ignore the red flags, make excuses, and dive right back in, only to end up in the exact same place. The pattern is obvious to everyone but them, and until they break the cycle, they're doomed to repeat it. But why does this happen? Why do people keep making the same mistakes? A big part of it comes down to comfort. Change is hard. Growth is uncomfortable. It's easier to stick with what you know, even if it's not working, than to step out of your comfort zone and try something new. And let's not forget ego. Admitting you've been wrong, especially repeatedly, isn't easy for a lot of people. So instead, They double down on their behavior, hoping for a different outcome. Here's the kicker. Life will keep teaching you the same lesson until you learn it. Whether it's in your career, relationships, or personal habits, if you don't take the time to reflect and grow, you'll stay stuck in the same cycle. And that's not just frustrating, it's tragic, because every mistake is an opportunity to learn, grow, and become better. But if you ignore that opportunity, you're not just repeating mistakes, you're wasting your potential. So, what can you do? Start by being honest with yourself. What patterns do you see in your life? Are there mistakes you've made more than once? If so, don't beat yourself up. Acknowledge them, reflect on why they happened, and make a plan to do things differently next time. Self-awareness is the first step to breaking the cycle. Here's the takeaway. Mistakes are fine. In fact, they're essential. But if you're not learning from them, you're not growing. And if you're not growing, you're just stuck in place, running in circles and wondering why nothing ever changes. All right, we're almost there. The next sign is a big one, and it's something that can destroy progress faster than anything else. Let's dive in. Sign 6. Disregard for consequences. Here's a question for you. Have you ever met someone who seems to live like there's no tomorrow? Someone who makes decisions without a second thought about what might happen next? It's like watching a train headed straight for a wall, and the conductor is grinning like everything's fine. That's what I call a complete disregard for consequences, and it's a surefire sign of stupidity. Let's be real. Every choice we make has consequences. Big or small, short-term or long-term, our actions ripple out and shape our lives. Smart people get this. They take the time to weigh their options, think things through, and consider the bigger picture. But stupid people, they leap before they look. They act on impulse, driven by short-term gratification or sheer recklessness, and then act surprised when everything falls apart. Here's an example. Imagine someone who spends their entire paycheck on luxury items, clothes, gadgets, nights out, without saving a dime. They're living large, but when an emergency pops up, they're scrambling for help. Or think about the person who constantly blows off work responsibilities, thinking they won't get caught, only to find themselves unemployed and wondering what went wrong. These are classic cases of ignoring consequences, and they never end well. But let's dig deeper. Why do people do this? Why do some folks ignore the obvious outcomes of their actions? It often comes down to a mix of immaturity, selfishness, and a lack of foresight. They're so focused on what they want right now that they don't stop to ask, what's this going to cost me later? It's a dangerous way to live because life has a way of catching up with you, whether you're ready or not. And here's the thing. Disregarding consequences doesn't just hurt the person making the bad decisions. It affects everyone around them. Think about the parent who makes poor financial choices and leaves their family struggling to get by. Or the friend who constantly flakes out, leaving others to pick up the slack. These behaviors create a ripple effect, and the damage spreads far beyond the person at the center of it. Now, let me tell you something important. Smart people aren't perfect. They don't always get it right, and sometimes they act impulsively too. The difference is that when they mess up, they take responsibility and learn from it. Stupid people, on the other hand, keep doing the same thing over and over again, thinking somehow, this time will be different. So, how do you avoid this trap? Start by pausing before you act. Seriously, take a moment to think. Ask yourself, what happens if I do this? What's the best case scenario? The worst case scenario? And is this really worth it? It sounds simple, but you'd be surprised how many disasters can be avoided by just thinking things through. And here's another tip. Learn from others. If you see someone else suffering the consequences of a poor decision, take note. You don't have to touch the fire yourself to know it's hot. Use their experience as a guide, and save yourself the pain. At the end of the day, life is all about choices. The smart ones lead to growth, success, and happiness. The stupid ones, well, they they lead to regret. So, before you make your next big decision, stop and think. Your future self will thank you for it. All right, we've made it through all 6 signs. But before we wrap up, let's take a step back and talk about what all of this really means. Because it's not just about pointing out flaws. It's about something much bigger. Let's bring it all together. Why understanding stupidity matters. All right, we've gone through the 6 signs of a stupid person, and by now, you're probably reflecting on what you've seen in others, or maybe even in yourself. That's good, because here's the thing. Understanding stupidity isn't about labeling people or tearing them down. It's about awareness. It's about recognizing these patterns so we can grow beyond them, avoid the traps, and live smarter, more fulfilling lives. Let's face it, stupidity isn't rare. It's everywhere. We see it in the news, at work, in our social circles, and sometimes staring back at us in the mirror. But here's the silver lining. Stupidity isn't permanent. It's not a life sentence. It's a behavior, a mindset, and that means it can change. Why does this matter so much? Because stupidity doesn't just hold individuals back, it holds everyone back. When people refuse to learn, when they blame others, act overconfident, or ignore consequences, the ripple effects are massive. Relationships suffer, progress stalls, communities fall apart, and the scary part, most people who exhibit these behaviors don't even realize they're doing it. But here's where it gets interesting. The fact that you're here, watching this, tells me something important. You're not one of those people. You're curious, you want to understand, you're willing to reflect, to learn, and to grow. And that's the opposite of stupidity. It's intelligence in action. So what's the big takeaway? It's this: stupidity isn't about someone else. It's about all of us, because at some point, every single one of us has been guilty of these behaviors. Maybe you've resisted learning because it felt uncomfortable. Maybe you've blamed others because it was easier than owning up to your mistakes. Maybe you've been overconfident, ignored consequences, or failed to show empathy. That's okay. What matters is what you do next. Here's your challenge. Take what you've learned today and use it. Look at your own life. Where do these signs show up? Be brutally honest with yourself, and then make a plan to do better. Start small. Commit to listening more, learning more, and taking responsibility for your actions. Challenge your own beliefs. Step out of your comfort zone, and above all, stay open to growth, and don't stop there. Share this knowledge. Help others recognize these patterns in their lives, because when we hold ourselves and each other accountable, we create a ripple effect of positive change. We build stronger relationships, better communities, and a smarter, more compassionate world. So, here's the final thought I want to leave you with. Intelligence isn't about being perfect. It's not about always having the right answer or never making mistakes. It's about how you respond. It's about how you grow, and it's about how you treat the people around you. Stupidity closes doors. Intelligence opens them. The choice is yours. Now, I want to hear from you. Which of these signs resonated with you the most? Have you seen these behaviors in others, or maybe in yourself? Drop a comment below and let's start a conversation. Because talking about this stuff is how we all get better. And remember, the smartest thing you can ever do is keep learning. Let's keep growing, together. Conclusion. All right, let's bring it all together. We've gone through the 6 signs of a stupid person. Refusal to learn, overconfidence, blaming others, lack of empathy, repeating mistakes, and disregarding consequences. Now let me tell you something important. This isn't just about spotting stupidity in others. It's about recognizing it in ourselves. The truth is, nobody's perfect. We've all been guilty of at least one of these behaviors at some point in our lives. The difference between staying stuck and moving forward is self-awareness. It's being able to look at yourself in the mirror and say, yeah, I've done that, but I don't have to keep doing it. Here's what you need to remember. Stupidity isn't a fixed trait. It's not who you are. It's what you do. And the good news? That means it's entirely within your power to change. The moment you decide to stop resisting growth, start listening, and take responsibility for your life, you're already leaving those behaviors behind. But don't stop there. Take what you've learned today and use it. Reflect on how these signs show up in your own life, and then challenge yourself to break free from them. It won't always be easy, but I promise you, it will be worth it. Because the opposite of stupidity isn't just intelligence, it's self-awareness. It's growth. It's becoming the best version of yourself. And if there's one thing I want you to take away from this, it's this. The smartest thing you can ever do is stay curious. Never stop learning, questioning, or growing, because the moment you think you've got it all figured out, that's the moment you've stopped growing. So here's my challenge to you. Go out there and live smarter. Be open to new ideas. Take responsibility for your actions. Show empathy to the people around you. Learn from your mistakes, and always, always, think before you act. Because when you do, you're not just avoiding stupidity, you're building a life you can be proud of. And hey, if this video resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Start a conversation, challenge each other to grow, and let's all work together to be a little smarter every single day. Remember, intelligence isn't about knowing everything, it's about being willing to learn anything. Thanks for sticking with me through this journey. Now go out there, make better choices, and most importantly, keep growing. See you in the next one.